Thank you, Tim. So for those of you who are here today, thank you so much for coming to learn about how your business can create a supplier diversity program. So Be Local Illinois is a nonprofit organization that exists to grow, support, and advocate for the community of Illinois businesses that have committed to a triple bottom line of purpose, profit, and planet. Certified B Corps are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. B Corps are accelerating a global culture to shift and redefine what business and success mean to build a more inclusive and sustainable economy. So while this event is hosted by Be Local Illinois, supplier diversity is applicable to all businesses, regardless of products, goods, or services, and that is what we will be exploring today. So here's our agenda for today. We are going to start with our introductions with our panelists, get into understanding the meat of the issue. What is a supplier diversity program? Why does it matter? And finally, how do we take steps to implement supplier diversity? And with the wealth of experience on this panel, I have no doubt that we'll have a fruitful and productive conversation. So thank you all for being here with us today. And to start off, I will just introduce myself. My name is Robin. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Senior Engagement Officer at KeHE Collective, which is an organization and social enterprise in Chicago with the mission of eradicating financial and relational poverty through the power of gainful employment and a vision to sweep the nation to eradicate financial and relational poverty. So I am here to support my colleagues in Be Local Illinois. I'm also a Baumhart Scholar at Loyola University, 6 months to graduation, and very excited to be here with this fantastic group of people. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Laura.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited about talking to you about this opportunity. I work for KeHE. We were founded in 1952 here in Illinois. We are a national natural and specialty food distributor. We became a certified B Corporation in 2015, and we take it up just a little bit of a notch. Instead of a triple bottom line, we believe in a quadruple bottom line, that people, planet, profit, and purpose are equally important in our organization. We believe that we are in business to serve to make lives better, whether that's our employees, our community, our suppliers, our retail partners, that we have a hand up philosophy versus a hand out. We want to uplift people and communities. My role specifically is sustainability and corporate responsibility. I'm responsible for our B Corp certification. I sit on our Diversity and Inclusion Council. I have the privilege of working with different industry organizations such as FMI. I sit on their D&I and sustainability committees. Most recently joined Ratio Institute. And we are also part of the JEDI Collaborative, which is a group of brands, retailers, distributors that are trying to bring more diversity within the natural product space. And I believe there's such a tie between diversity and sustainability, and how the most vulnerable populations are going to be the most impacted, and how do we help those communities adapt and so forth. So why I'm speaking today is that I'm fortunate to lead our diverse trade program at KeHE, where we highlight and support diverse suppliers within our brand portfolio.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. We're excited to have you here. And before I move to Jeremy's slide, I do want to remind everyone that there is closed captioning available for those who would like to use it. All right, Jeremy, you are up.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Holston. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the director of the Illinois LGBT Chamber of Commerce. We are a statewide chamber supporting the voices of nearly 50,000 LGBTQ business owners across the state of Illinois, including some dynamic LGBTQ B Corps that are part of B Corp Illinois as well. Today, we have over 300 members, including a number of LGBTQ and ally-owned small businesses, as well as a number of corporate companies and nonprofit members as well. Like most awesome chambers, we support our members in connecting them to marketing, networking, professional development, and advocacy. Particularly, we help LGBT businesses, those that are 51% or more LGBT owned, managed, and controlled, get access to the LGBT Business Enterprise Certification. The great thing, as we'll talk about, and as some of you know, the certification is a great tool for LGBTQ businesses and other diverse owned businesses to be able to stand out from their competition, going after new opportunities by trying to enter new markets. And so I'm excited to talk about the certification and how it can be a resource to LGBTQ business owners looking to grow and anyone else who's looking to enhance their own supplier diversity programs as well. Then just in a nerd sort of manner, I'm actively in a certificate of corporate social responsibility program. And so we're talking about a lot of these great things. And so everything Laura just said has me super excited to connect with her sometime down the road. I'm super excited about all things B Lab, B Corp certification. So excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that introduction. We're excited to have you. All right, Omar, let's go.
All right. Hello, everyone. Omar Brown, Senior Vice President, People and Culture Officer for the Big Ten Conference. In general, I describe my role as HR plus. So you think of everything HR, and then the plus is everything else. So that is leading diversity, equity, and inclusion across the conference. I was invited to this panel because I've had the unique opportunity of leading supplier diversity programs at 3 different organizations. City of Chicago, University of Illinois, and Chicago Transit Authority. So I'm excited to be part of the conversation and look forward to some interesting dialogue. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Omar. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Vincent Williams. Great to have you here with us.
All right, thanks so much, Robin. So honored to be on this great panel of distinguished panelists, if you will. My name is Vince Williams. I'm the president and CEO of the Chicago Minority Supplier Development Council. We are a 54-year-old organization based right here in Chicago that certifies minority-owned businesses, those that identify as Hispanic, Black, Asian, which is Asian Indian and Asian Pacific Islander, as well as Native American. These are entrepreneurs and enterprises that are 51% owned and daily operated or daily involved in the management of their organizations. We certify them and then connect them with public as well as private organizations that essentially have supplier diversity programs and are looking to source and procure diverse suppliers. Our 4 pillars are to certify these businesses, make sure again that they've been vetted and confirmed to be minority owned. Then we help develop them to make sure that they are corporate ready, have cybersecurity measures in place, and bonding opportunities. We advocate for them with local legislation, elected officials, to make sure that the laws are, of course, for them. And then ultimately, we connect them to the opportunities so that they can scale and grow and sustain. Again, really excited to be a part of this organization. I'm a native Chicagoan. I come from a family of entrepreneurs that's been engaged in minority development, if you will, for a number of years. And as we seek to share more opportunities for those businesses that employ from the communities, we will be able to showcase that with supplier diversity. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vince. And it's, I hope for our attendees today, this is a powerhouse crew of folks. So we're super excited to have you here. So I want to start us off by getting into the issue at hand. So enabling a diverse and inclusive workforce starts in the supply chain. Supplier diversity is a complex issue and without the right approach, it's really hard to make meaningful, sustainable change. And understanding suppliers' internal programs and diversity commitments, such as women and minority-owned businesses, is a critical step to building an inclusive workforce. So over the past few years, we've seen issues of DEI come up to the forefront. We've seen a multitude of businesses make statements around their commitments to DEI. And what I'd like to explore today is really the external facing DEI efforts around supply chain and investing in supplier diversity programs. So for the underlying issue, what do we need to know about the steps that we've taken to get to where we are and how we continue making this journey profitable and purposeful? So Vincent, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. It's a great question, Robin. So essentially, Chicago MSDC was started right here in Chicago, 1968, right after the civil unrest that we experienced from the Democratic National Convention at the time. A group of white or majority business owners at the time, Allstate, AT&T, Walgreens, got together, Marshall Fields, and they got together and they said, hey, you know, we've got to do better. Essentially, the business case for supplier diversity was born then. They said, we realize that there are more diverse businesses here locally that we can source from. We just have to intentionally do this. It's so ironic that history repeated itself, right? 53 years later. And what we saw over the past few summers with the civil unrest, the George Floyd killings, the Breonna Taylor verdicts, and some of the other things that have been happening. And really what this has done now is really re-energize the importance of supplier diversity and these businesses looking to source either locally or nationally, again, to uncover ways of keeping this business ecosystem vibrant, alive, and ultimately contributing to the positively to their bottom line. And that's what we're experiencing now. So we're seeing a ton of organizations, meaning that their C-suite executives are committing to supplier diversity. One of the things that my organization does is we help you assess exactly where you are right now, if you have an existing program, and how we can help that grow as a diversity partner. And that's what I think some of my other colleagues here on this panel can attest to, is that when you as an organization commit to this, it's helping those businesses in the community. It's helping those that they employ from within the community. And it's also helping to sustain literally the ecosystem that we're all trying to create from a business directive and a business diversity perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So well said. So Jeremy, I'd like to move to you next, speaking about the issue in supplier diversity. And I think you can give us a big, broad lens on kind of where we've been and where we're going, specifically within the LGBTQ plus community.
Sure. So, when you think back to what Vince was just referring to, is really the way that most corporations and most governments still, for the most part, look at supplier diversity. Most companies today still look at supplier diversity programs from the lens of primarily actively thinking about the way that they include minority and women, and every now and then disabled and veteran-owned businesses, depending on the company or the location. Where we are still seeing much needed momentum needing to happen is in the space of recognizing LGBT businesses in those supplier diversity programs. There is a national LGBT Chamber of Commerce, which is located in Washington, D.C. Their whole purpose is to manage, to control, and to monitor the certification process for those LGBT-owned businesses. I believe the program has been around now for more than, I think maybe 20 years, and there are more than 1,200 plus certified LGBT businesses across the country, all who have gone through a qualified, tested, and true process that has been prepared by the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And so today, through that momentum, through that work, we now know that there are an estimated 1.2 million LGBT business owners across the country, with I think the economic impact is maybe, I think, $1.7 trillion with those LGBTQ business owners. With that, we still know that most of the recognition right now primarily lies in the private sector, with more than 2/3 of Fortune 500 companies actively recognizing the certification. So there is huge opportunity for LGBT businesses, especially those who represent multiple dual backgrounds as minority and LGBTQ, to access multiple certifications to build these opportunities with these companies. But there's still so much more space to go ahead of us. Right now, there are a few governments across the country, including here in Illinois, that actively include the work to identify and to source LGBT businesses into their supplier diversity programs. Right now, again, we don't have that in Illinois, and so that's a space that we're still working on. And so one of the things that's important to us that we're always saying is that the more LGBT businesses we have in number, the stronger that we are. There are few, as you all know, if you're an LGBTQ person, if you're going to get a bank loan, no one's asking you if you're LGBTQ plus. And so many other sort of business applications, business programs, no one is actively tracking the impact that LGBTQ businesses are having in our local economy. And so by getting certified, you add to the numbers in our local community, you add to the total economic impact as an LGBTQ business community. And so overall, you really allow us to move forward in saying that we have an active, strong, visible, vibrant LGBTQ community serving in diverse range of industries who want to do work here in Illinois. And so that's where we've been. And as we get more people certified, we will definitely be able to make some very more impact in including those folks in some of those programs.
Awesome. I love that. And it's exciting to hear all the progress that we're making and heading in the right direction. So thank you. So Laura, I'd like to go to you next and kind of get your perspective from inside a company that does production at the level that you do. How have you seen kind of the underlying issue of the need for supplier diversity, and how has it played out in your work?
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, it's just a good business strategy to be embracing diversity and inclusion in general, right? You want to attract the best talent. You want to get the best thought leadership at your organization. You also need to represent and look like the consumers that are buying your product. So you can't deny the demographics within the United States. What is it, by 2040, 2045, it's going to be majority minority. So there's a business case for paying attention to diversity and inclusion. And I think it's a natural evolution to start looking outside your four walls and see how else can you have a greater impact. And that's really what a supplier diversity program is. It's a way for us to ensure that we're inviting people to the table, that folks are being included in the process, and that we're broadening our scope and including diversity and inclusion in all aspects of our business, not just within our own organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And Omar, I want to give you the opportunity to respond to this as well, kind of looking at the issue from a holistic sense and seeing, given your experience kind of getting these programs going, where have you seen this be a factor in your decision-making and implementation process?
Yep. So it's been, I was sitting back thinking about it. Every time I've worked in the supplier diversity space for different organizations, they were all at, I'm going to say, different levels of maturity around it. When I started working for the city of Chicago, they moved supplier diversity to the Office of Compliance. And we were really about compliance, but compliance in the fact that the city had goals for diverse businesses, and my job was to help make sure that those diverse businesses got those contracts, got paid for doing the work, were involved in it. And so really being there as an advocate for them. When I was at CTA, it was a little bit different. CTA has a long-standing program, but they were, I'm going to say, looking for stabilization, right? Like, how do we keep this program? We don't want to just keep doing the same thing. How do we stabilize it, innovate it, and really get the word out that we're doing business? We want to do business. We want to be there. So one of the things I would do is, as we were building, I think it was the Red Line work, I would go out to the community to really engage those businesses to help them understand, how do you do work with CTA? The other thing we would do is we would bring in prime contractors, right? And so we would have sort of you have like a hiring fair. We would have a small business fair. So that way prime contractors and subcontractors can meet each other, start to develop those relationships. So that way those diverse businesses could get on our contracts. And a little bit about CTA, because it's so large, a lot of the contracts are really, really hard for small businesses or diverse businesses to handle. And so by meeting primes and asking primes, is there a way, can you break up this piece of work to allow maybe two smaller businesses to do the front leg and the back leg, as opposed to making it just one large contract? So I would just say it depends on where you are as an organization as to what levers you need to pull to really support diverse businesses.
Awesome. Thanks, Omar. And I think that gives us great context to move into the next part of our discussion, which is what is a supplier diversity program? And I think as we have alluded to so far today, diversity itself is a great business strategy. We are in this extended moment in time when diversity, equity, and inclusion are really coming to the forefront. And we've seen commitments verbally and written. But what I love about supplier diversity is that this is actionable steps internally, regardless of what type of business you're running, that can really make a difference. So I'd like to start off by talking to Laura. So given your role and work in this area, I'd love to hear kind of a lay of the land through the context of KeHE.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, like I said, we sell other people's products. So I'm just going to be using cauliflower probably as my example, since for me it's recognizable because it's always in my freezer. It's a women-owned business. So a supplier diversity program is basically finding, supporting, fostering, mentoring diverse suppliers so they could be successful in your business, however it is that you need to work with them. They're usually 51% owned, operated, controlled by whichever minority group you're looking at. So it could be LGBT, veteran, women, minority, people with disabilities, etc. It's basically ensuring that, like I said before, that everybody is invited to the table. And I think Omar brought up a really good point. It's also making sure they're going to be successful. Sometimes it's educating them prior to actually being included in the program, getting them ready, creating equity in that process so everybody has an equal chance at getting that bid for it. It's a proactive process. It is not a check the box kind of process. The worst thing that you could do is hire the wrong person, select the wrong person and everything. But I always find it very discouraging or disrespectful to assume that when you hear that it has to be like the best candidate, as if a diverse supplier or something isn't going to be the best candidate, right? It's not a handout. It's a hand up. It's just leveling the playing field so everybody is invited. Everybody has an equal chance for getting that bid and for winning that contract. So I think that would be the nuts and bolts of it, unless you wanted me to go into more specific components of the supplier diversity program and how it looks.
We will get back to components in a minute, but kind of starting on this high level, let's go to Omar next, and then I think we'll jump to Vince. So Omar, would love to hear from you about when you're starting a supplier diversity program, what does it look like to kind of give that structure to something that doesn't exist yet?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think it's, you start with a couple of things. First of all, you have to start by doing your own internal review of what you purchase and who you purchase from, right? And so if you're going to say we want to bring in diverse businesses, you need to understand where the opportunities lie. It was interesting. I used to be a consultant, and I was a consultant for Burger King. And so Burger King, and we talked about supplier diversity. And one of the things they talked about is, they made sort of the offhanded remark about there's no black farmer that can sell the millions of eggs or whatever we need in order to do to make sandwiches in the morning. But then I came back and said, but there are tons of black trucking companies which can transport those eggs from that place to your businesses. And so that's what supplier diversity is about, is taking the time to look at what you purchase and then identify where there are opportunities to diversify your supply chain. And so that I think that's the first step, is really understanding that. And then you can go from there, but at least understand what you purchase, who you purchase from, and even being willing to, I'm going to say, bargain hard with them. If you, for instance, if you are buying eggs, I am sure there are multiple large eggs producers in America, right? Just because you're buying from this one, you can challenge them and say, how are they diversifying their supply chain and who are they using, right? And if they say, you know what, we don't believe in supplier diversity, I would challenge that company to say, you know what, maybe we should look at another supplier that has values that are very similar to ours. And so there's a couple ways you can go about it, but I would just say the first thing is really analyzing where you're spending your money.
Great, I love that. And I think I'll move us to our next slide here, which is taking a look at components. So Vincent, I'd like to start with you. One of the things that I love that you said in your introduction is talking about development and advocacy. And I think that that's such a great point, and it goes into what Omar is speaking to and Laura is speaking to as well. So as we kind of build the framework for supplier diversity, how do we do it effectively? How do we make sure that we are advocating for our suppliers?
Absolutely, thanks. And I too think that Laura and Omar just really hit the nail on the head by mentioning what metrics and what types of commitment that you have to have from an organization to have a successful program, but also look at the program as constantly being able to improve, right? It's a constant improvement plan. And so as Omar mentioned, when you look at the equation or what factors in your supply chain for actually securing products, how can you plug in diverse suppliers into that equation? And that really is what the crux of supplier diversity and what the program is. And that's why we know that the business case exists, that it's proven, and that it is successful, if you will, as well. And that's where it comes down to having this advocacy and development programs for it too. If there aren't any metrics in place, meaning a municipality or a developer or someone who is essentially running the program, a C-suite executive, if they aren't saying, I want a minimum of 40% diverse suppliers to be a part of this equation, then why would anyone else in your supply chain actually adhere to that? And then possibly hold their bonuses to that, meaning that they won't receive, their performance metrics are based on adhering to that supplier diversity. And I think, Omar, you can probably attest to that from the city and from, right, what you're experiencing now from Burger King, all of the others. And then Laura, too, what you're seeing with some of their women businesses, and Jeremy, for that same matter, with some of the LGBT certified businesses. If we have those metrics put in place, meaning they're written in stone, and that businesses are going to be held accountable for that, being graded on that, it's a part of their social corporate responsibility score, their KPI metrics, then we're going to see that activity take place and that impact being had. And then for us as an organization that's able to share that impact, we have this data that we can then share that success story. I think that ultimately leads to the success of all business diversity across the entire ecosystem, therefore, too.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to frame everything. Now, I want to just very briefly mention these components. So, Laura, you want to give us like a very high level overview, knowing that we're going to come back to these in much more depth in the spring?
Sure, absolutely. So it's great and absolutely necessary to have the metrics, but I think we have to start a little bit further upstream with, why does your company even want to have a supplier diversity program? What are they trying to accomplish? What is their current purchasing policy, and how do you plug into that? Having an advisory council of the key stakeholders to gain that alignment is going to be really important as well. Educating them on what this program is, why it's important, how it fits into your overall business strategy. Making sure that everybody is trained on this process. So both internally and externally, like we kind of talked about already, I think are things that you have to think about, and how you want to structure and track and measure your success. Are you just going to look at your tier 1 suppliers, the people that you pay directly? Or are you going to look at your tier 2 suppliers, which would be the people that those people are paying? How do you want to define your supplier diversity program, and what makes the most sense for your specific business?
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. And as I mentioned, we are planning to do a 2.0 in the spring, so we'll get into all of the meat of that. So the next thing I want to talk about is claim versus certification. This is something that we've discussed, an incredibly important factor in supplier diversity. Now, Jeremy, I want to start with you. What are your thoughts on the difference between claiming to meet standards and being certified, and where does that fit into the effectiveness and longevity of these sorts of programs?
Sure. You know, simply put, I think the difference is, especially for those companies who are working with diverse suppliers, the simple sort of thing is legality of those claims. So, for example, you know, you could be bidding on a major project out at the airport. Your contract in your bid, you might be claiming that you are using 36% minority owned business participation on this project. If you are actively tracking, collecting certifications in this bid, that is one way that you can for sure attest to that claim that you have made as the person bidding on the project. However, if the suppliers that you are working with, if someone claims that they are minority owned and 6 months later it is found out that that business is not actually minority owned and you've made a claim of this, then there might be some legal repercussions against you as the business owner who has made this claim. And so very simply, you want to protect your business. And so I definitely encourage everyone when you're thinking about how you're going to incorporate and set up your program, do think about how you will be tracking and measuring who has that certification. And ultimately, it's also important, as you sort of asked, for the longevity of these programs. When we have quality systems and controls in place to make sure that no one is being fraudulent or trying to cause harm to the program, then it really helps to provide confidence to corporations when they are working with diverse suppliers to provide these certifications down the road. And then it really just adds to the overall integrity of the overall diverse community. And so I definitely encourage folks to always try to prefer to accept certification over having a sort of self-ID sort of certification or claim form, as it is the ultimate best way to protect your business down the road.
Awesome. Well said, Jeremy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And you can see some logos on the screen for those of you who are looking, but we also will provide some resources following the call for a full list. So moving into why, really, we've talked about the issue, we've talked about the what, but I want to talk about the value add. I want to talk about the business case, as Vincent mentioned earlier. So Omar, I would like to start with you, and I'd like to think about the framing of the added value of supplier diversity within the context of the organization itself.
Yep. So when I think about it, I think about it two ways. One, most diverse businesses are small businesses, but they're local businesses. So by supporting diverse businesses, you are supporting your local economy. You're creating that cycle that goes right back into it, which helps, you know, it feeds it. It becomes a beast almost, where by supporting those businesses, they hire people locally who then shop locally, you know, and then it comes back around. And so that the first piece of it is just supporting local and making sure that we keep that ecosystem going in our communities. And that's really a big benefit. I would say the other thing is just the outward facing it. And I'm looking at some of either the brand equity is one piece, but it shows the D&I commitment is the other piece. But I think it's a piece of living or breathing what you say. You can't talk about being a diverse organization, even hiring diverse people, if you won't do business with diverse businesses. So you have to do both sides of it, internal and external. And I think those are really, you know, two key factors of why you should do it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll kind of segue into Vincent. So at Chicago Minority Supplier Development Council, you focus a lot on sourcing and onboarding. So can you tell us a little bit about the implications of responsibly sourcing these diverse businesses?
Absolutely. So I'd also like to go back to the question that you had posed earlier about claim versus certification.
Yeah, please.
Think about that many of these private organizations receive some tax incentives or tax rebates, if you will, for working with diverse suppliers, as well as these diverse suppliers also receive some tax advantages for working with those grants or funds and things that they receive from those that are looking to source with them too. So that's kind of one of the pluses or major advantages, if you will, for working with a certified business that's certified as woman, minority, LGBT, so that they can take advantage of that. If you just claim the certification, which is still great, you're committing to your D&I commitment, or maybe some of the other, again, of sourcing locally, but you aren't able to take advantage of some of the other reasons, if you will, that you can work with that. And I hope that kind of differentiates, if you will, one of the advantages for the importance of a certification, and why particularly private businesses are looking to really work with those businesses that truly have been vetted and confirmed to identify one of those certification classes there. In addition to that, why is because, again, it's the right thing to do. It really is such a commitment level from organizations that helps us to sustain and have a valuable economic impact ecosystem, business ecosystem. I think this pandemic has probably caused many businesses to identify how they can source locally, since the supply chain was disrupted from those. And then I think we're still experiencing that today. I think I saw on the news that there's millions of cargo ships that are still just sitting out there, right? Meaning that maybe we aren't going to have many supplies here, that we were anticipating having, for the holidays or some of the other events that are coming or that are on the horizon. What's a business to do then, right? If you aren't able to take into consideration that your product cannot be received here because you did not source that locally or did not have an alternative for that. We'll look to some of the diverse suppliers. One of the things that we also continue to hear is that a lot of times we aren't able to find someone locally that are a diverse supplier. Well, my answer to that is, where are you looking? We have over 1,000 certified minority businesses here. I'm sure, Jeremy, you have a number of, LGBT certified businesses here. So again, that intentionality and that strategic outreach of working with organizations like who's represented here on the panel is a great way for you to understand your why, make it easier, have partners with it, and then essentially contribute to the ongoing for each other.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I agree, this is a pretty killer network to become a part of. And to your point, we're about to go into this season where shipping is the peak that it is throughout the entire year. So how do we make sure that that is easy for our suppliers to connect to each other and make recommendations for who is going to get these roles? So Laura, I want to move into supplier diversity at KeHE and talking about the why there. You already talked about cauliflower once, so it's on this slide. We get to talk about it again, but would love to hear about the why through KeHE's lens.
So supplier diversity for us, it just makes sense. It's just that next evolution of how we can embrace diversity and inclusion. Speaking about like the grocery store, right? You go shopping, you don't really think about what it took for those brands to make it on the shelf and how much competition there was and so forth. We work with 5,000 vendors. So helping them cut through the noise so they can even just have the appointment with a retailer to present their items. So our diverse trade program really started with one of our category managers, James Osborne, who wanted to see how he can uplift the voices of our diverse suppliers. So that's how it started, and it grew from there. We started with like 113 suppliers that self-identified, and today we're at about 280 in the program. And just this past week, we had another, we call it a trend finder event, and we doubled the number of applications that we received. We doubled the number of appointments that we're taking, and just inviting more suppliers to the table to learn about how to do business with the distributor, what it takes to go and be successful at retail. And then we leave it up to them to see if that's, if they're ready for that and how they could be successful.
That's great. I love that. It's so exciting to hear. So I'm going to move us along a little bit, hoping that we still have time for Q&A toward the end of this. So Jeremy, I want to talk to you about implementation. And the way that I'm thinking about this is that at an organizational level where Laura is working, for example, there might be more buy-in at the top end. You might have a little bit more support with the CSR department, but knowing that we are talking about essentially any size business can get started in supplier diversity, how do we start the process? How do we begin steps toward the implementation?
Well, I think both Omar and Laura gave some really great examples of that earlier in terms of how to get started. Another thing that I would just say to be sure to keep in mind, and Laura kind of spoke to this too, is that the great thing about supplier diversity, and one of the notes that you can share and as you're trying to get your leaders on board, is that this is also a great opportunity to cut down on costs for your company. It also presents an opportunity to be innovative in some new ways. And so as you become engaged with more suppliers from more different backgrounds who are in unique spaces, they're able to present you products and solutions to challenges that you might not yet have even been aware of. And so those are two things that I think can always be helpful sort of topics or key points when talking to leaders and trying to get started. So being helpful to remind them of like costs. We all know that when it comes to making strategic, hard decisions within our company, when we talk about how we can save costs long term, that's always going to be a winning strategy. So when we can do that, present that, of course, if you have some examples, some research, that's always helpful to have on board. I think, sometimes one of those other things, especially like with leaders, is always this, well, how do we get started or who do we get started with? And so Laura, I love how you mentioned, that person on your team sort of having that initiative to just get started and be like, how do I do this? And so sometimes it takes someone just saying, I'm just going to make this a passion project for maybe 30 to 60 days, see what kind of awesome information I can find or what one key sort of highlight I can come up with, and then being able to use that as an example to point to others that if we actually invest in replicating this process, then imagine what we could have as solutions across the full company. But ultimately, I think in terms of implementation, I think Omar and Laura suggested some great options. But for those folks who are thinking about getting certified, I do encourage you to reach out to some of the networks that you see here with us today. Vince at the Chicago Minority Supplier Development Council. There's us at the LGBT Chamber of Commerce. There's also the Women's Business Development Center, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Novova for veterans, Disability End for differently disabled owned businesses. And so I would encourage all of you to contact those organizations to find out how to get the process started. One great thing for local LGBT businesses in Illinois or any state that has an affiliate, if you belong to an LGBT affiliate chamber, you do not have to pay the cost to get certified as an LGBT business. And so another recommendation for those folks wanting to get started with a program, I echo what was said earlier. Oftentimes people are saying, we don't know how to find them. We don't know, how to get started. So think of our organizations as tools to find some of those early suppliers, to tap into some programs and workshops to strengthen your programs or to build those relationships. Vince's organization and ours this year for the first time, we hosted a matchmaking event. So it's probably similar to what Laura just mentioned. So there are really great opportunities to get connected with local diverse suppliers who could really be great solutions. And so ultimately, really lean into the local resources that are available to you. Invest into those organizations as well. When you invest in those organizations, they can create better programs that provide more training and that also create better long-term wins and solutions for you as a business as well. So get involved, invest, be a partner, and help us all move forward.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was so wonderfully said. I really appreciate that framework. And Omar, I also want to talk to you a little bit about implementation, since you got some of these programs really up and running. So I know that you had already mentioned kind of being boots on the ground, going to talk to business leaders. Are there other steps that you would recommend for the folks listening today?
So I would say it's from a supplier diversity standpoint, it's being proactive as a business. When I was at the University of Illinois, I took over a position. Someone was in it, but they left and it was dormant for maybe a year. And so I walked in, here's a program that exists. They have all the tools, but no one really knows about it because there was no one sitting in the seat. And so being proactive and really going to the different diversity councils and going to events and making sure, it does cost a little money for a business to do it, but participating in those events, really saying that we are committed, and then meeting people and then helping them understand what your process is. Because at the university, it's a bid process. You have to complete a bid, submit the bid by a certain date, and then the bid is open. And so helping them understand how that works, or it's, connect with the prime contractor, understand what their subcontract. So it's really, I'm going to say it's intentional. I think Vincent might have said intentional earlier. It's being intentional, but it's also being out there. It's showing the commitment is more than just saying we have a program or saying if someone comes, we'll support you. You have to really go to where businesses are, meet them where they are, help them understand your process, help them understand what you're trying to do, and also help them understand where they can be successful. And sometimes, I'm not going to lie, that conversation is not it's not a good conversation because it could be janitorial supplies, and we have a long-term contract with janitorial supplies. So unfortunately, we're not looking for diverse businesses for janitorial supplies. But what I could say is there might be something else that we can find a way to engage you and support your business. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's proactive, it's intentional, it's being out front, it's not waiting for businesses to come knock on your door.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, and this conversation of investing in supplier diversity, what you mentioned is a really great example of an opportunity that the business has to say, you know what, I'm not looking for a diverse supplier in this area. I can just walk away, or I can make the conscious decision to be intentional, to be inclusive, and to make sure that I do my due diligence to continue finding the right diverse supplier to fulfill the needs that I do have. So I love that framing of it. So I want to go ahead and open the room for discussion. I want our listeners to know that you have the ability to type in the chat if you have any questions specifically for our panelists. Really want to hear from you and see if there are any questions that we can answer while we're here for the next 10 minutes. And in that time, Vincent, I'd love to go back to you. Would you tell us a little bit more about what's happening at Chicago MSDC and what you've got going on in the future?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I also like to add in that I think, in addition to what Omar and Laura and Jeremy have said, it's a complete commitment from these organizations, meaning that you can't go into this partially. As Omar mentioned, he went into a seat that just laid there dormant for a while. It has to be the full commitment, meaning you fold it into your daily fabric of really what you're doing. That intentionality of saying, I want to work with diverse suppliers and diverse businesses, that has to be how you live, how you breathe, how you sleep, so that, again, as you identify them, it's not just going to be, oh, that was second nature or anything there. It's truly where you're going, and you can measure that impact there. So one of the things that we do here at Chicago MSDC is host a number of events, opportunities, if you will, for minority businesses and from our sister organizations and brother organizations like LGBT, of course, B Corp, and Women WBDC, as well as the veteran organizations, to get together so that we can showcase the opportunities that are coming from these organizations. So in April of 2022, April 20th and 21st to be exact, of 2022, at Navy Pier, we're going to be hosting the Chicago Business Opportunity Fair, our 55th annual opportunity fair. And this particular, it's going to be in person, which we're really looking forward to, especially considering these past 2 years, right, that we've been going through things virtually and experiencing things like this. But it's the opportunity for public and private organizations to get together, to meet, to network, to learn about what's happening in the industries, what's going on in the procurement space, learn about successes, Internet of Things, and ultimately opportunities for growth, for scalability, and again, meeting in person. One of the things I think I value here is here in the Midwest, we're about getting in person, right? Meeting, feeling, touching, seeing one another. And so that's what we're really looking for during that time. Throughout the remainder of the year, of course, we have a host of other events, procurement luncheons, breakfasts, as well as coffee chats, and then a new thing we're calling spilling the tea, where you have the opportunity to just learn about some other things that are going on in the industry with best practices and success stories of what's happening there. So again, with organizations like B Corp, B Illinois, LGBT Chamber, Big Ten, KeHE, I mean, we're all going to work together to make sure that we can continue to control this narrative on supplier diversity, the importance of it, and then how we're all contributing positively to it too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure
Let's
thing.
see, we've got one question in the pipeline here. Do any of the panelists have experience with defining and implementing supplier diversity in other cultures or continents? That's a great question. Thank you. Let's see. Anyone feeling confident to answer this question?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and stab in. So Chicago MSDC is actually a part of an affiliate network of 23 other councils across the nation. And then ultimately our parent company is NMSDC, the National Minority Supplier Development Council. And so what we've all identified is that as many of our minority business enterprises are scaling not only nationally, but internationally, especially during a pandemic like this, is that we're identifying other countries that also are incorporating certifications, minority certifications there, as well as incorporating what we're saying is diverse suppliers. And so there are some other organizations and certifications that are just starting up within these respective organizations or countries, if you will, that we're partnering with so that we can keep track of that. And if a major corporation or private entity reached out to us and said, hey, we're looking for an enterprise that can operate here, that has this certification there, we have all of that noted in our system there. So again, it's a great way to be able to provide access to more robust businesses, again, that are corporate ready, that have the capacity, if you will, to work with these organizations that are seeking to get that. And I think as, again, more organizations incorporate business diversity into what it is they're doing, we're going to see that really increase and the certification numbers increase too.
Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Anyone else around that question? Cool. I would like to jump into a question in the chat that I find fascinating and I'm excited about. Omar, did you want to say something? Came off mute.
Oh, I was going to talk about the question in the chat.
Okay, great. Let me say it. So as a tech startup and B Corp, we've struggled to meet diversity objectives in the tech sector as diversity metrics are notoriously poor. 83% white-owned, operated tech giants, less than 50% diverse workforce, et cetera, as well as being highly geographically concentrated in the Bay Area. Any thoughts, advice, or tips on how to handle market sectors like technology that have limited options for supplier diversity and buying local? So Omar, before you jump in, I just wanted to say to Christopher, who sent this question in, there are so many diverse tech folks out there. They just hang out together. So I would just say there's a lot of LinkedIn networking that can happen, you know, one-on-one coffee chats. Meet one person, ask to meet one more person, and really kind of get yourself into this community. So go for it, Omar.
Oh, I think you hit it. I was going to say there is, Christopher, there's probably an opportunity maybe to mentor a young, not necessarily person, but like a young business that's starting, right? And so when I don't know, you said technology, that's like as wide as, you know, my hand. So it can mean anything, but depending on the type of work, I would say maybe it's an opportunity to look at someone who's just starting a company, or I'm gonna say, you know, a few years old as a company. They can come in and maybe do something like, maybe it's level 1 support. I don't know if you're doing tech support, right? If you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, the level 3, you're building routers or, you know, whatever, maybe you can hire a corporation to be that level 1 help desk support. So when someone calls, they can talk to them. It's someone who has that technology experience, but they can't maybe build it out. So that's like an easy opportunity to me. If you're doing something a little bit more complex, I would challenge you to say, as Robin said, find who are those diverse technologists. A lot of them are starting their own companies. I forgot what was the tech hub. Was it 1827, 1817? What's the tech hub? I can't remember.
1871.
1871. There it is. So I mean, like, even and Christopher, I don't know your business, but go hang out at 1871. There are a lot of young businesses there trying to start, would love to have the opportunity to partner with a mature business, especially on an opportunity. So maybe it's not necessarily subcontract as much as partner or mentor someone. So maybe the first time, you do the work, you let them understand the type of work you do. And then the next time you can bring them on as a subcontractor to do a piece of the work. And I would just say the last thing is there are several nonprofits I feel in this space that are focused on how can we make Chicago a tech hub. And so if you can tap into some of those, I am positive that they can identify some young or, growing companies that would be willing to support.
Absolutely. And
I have
go ahead,
over
Vincent.
100 certified in IT. I have over 100 certified businesses. So
Yeah.
please reach out to us. Yeah. Again, as you said, Omar, it's as wide as your hands could hold is probably when you think of a general term like that. But if there are some particulars, please, Christopher, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or some of the other organizations here and allow us to be your partners, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I think that's one of the benefits of these third-party organizations is not just for the brand or the company that's being certified, but for the corporate sponsors that decide to also join your organizations, because you get a database, you get access to their database of all of these suppliers. And that just gives you a whole other opportunity of places to look to find these diverse suppliers.
Yeah. And I was just going to mention, Jeremy, I think you had a really excellent point in the chat, which is if this is something that is a real issue, then you can also find community partners, organizations that are interested in this work and work together to build an opportunity. And what I love about that, so I work at KeHE Collective, we do long-term employment partnerships. What I love about that is that you're building a pathway for success for people who may not have even known that the success was available to them. So I see the humanity in that and the equity in that, and I really love that idea. And one more thing that I'll just throw in from a diversity perspective is if your organization is entirely white and you are looking for diverse talent to supply from, there is also a time frame that you need to build a bridge between these two communities and say, we are not just looking for a job to be done, we are looking to build community and partnership and culture and make sure that we are paving the way for long-term success for everybody involved. So I think that that's a really exciting place to be. All right, anything else right now? Any final words from our panelists? Again, thank you all so much for being here today. It's been such a pleasure to hang out with these amazing folks.
Yeah, this has been awesome, Robin. Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, Jeremy, and Omar for allowing me to be a part of this with you all. I love the fact that you're essentially controlling the narrative now with conversations like this, but then also re-educating those about business diversity. So keep up the good work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so final plug for more information on B Corps and Be Local Illinois and how you can get your business certified for social and environmental performance. You're invited to check out our website. Like we mentioned, this deck will be shared, the recording will be shared. We've got some other materials from Chicago MSDC that we will be sharing as well. So we do have a plan to have a follow-up webinar in the spring. And so that goal is to really get into the meat of tracking, measuring, investing, scaling from the beginning to a large 1,000 plus employee corporation, as well as compliance, subcontracting, and payment streams. So keep your eyes open for that. And that's it, folks. Happy lunch hour. We're so grateful to have you here with us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.